All right, so in our next tutorial about Adobe Illustrator, we're going to be looking at how to create and edit shapes, which is a really basic thing to learn about in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to be using this tutorial here that was made by Adobe. It's really good, and it's got 3 parts that I'd like you to take a look at before you start the project. This first video, and they're very short, this is only 4 minutes long, gives you a basic overview of how to use the various shape tools. They're in Illustrator. Then it gets a little bit more involved with lines and how to use lines in Adobe Illustrator. And then finally, it's going to show you how to actually combine shapes together. And this also involves like learning how to subtract chunks off of a particular shape or add pieces onto another shape. So these 3 things together are going to be what you'll need for today's project. There is a 4th tutorial here about tracing to make shapes from other art, which we'll get into later. Feel free to take a look at this, but we'll do another project later that involves this 4th step in the Adobe tutorial here on create and edit shapes, but you don't need this 4th step for what we're doing today. Okay, so I want to move over into Illustrator for a second to show you, give you just a quick little overview of what it's going to be about. It's very similar to Photoshop, but there are some differences. And the shape tools are here. It starts off, you have to hold down the mouse, and you'll see that these are the different shape tools that automatically come loaded in here. Rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and so forth. So when you click on a particular tool, let's say the rectangle tool, one thing to notice that they don't really go into detail yet in the Adobe tutorial is that under the properties over here, you'll see that there's the fill and the stroke. This is similar to Photoshop as well, the same thing. But the fill is the actual color that would be inside your shape. Right now, when it has the diagonal red line, it means there is no color. But I could just as easily pick a color and have that be the color for whatever shape I'm going to use. There's also the stroke, and there's 2 things to pay attention here to. One is the points, that's how thick the line is, versus the color. And you click on the color here, and you can pick whatever color you want. Right now it's set to black, right? I can make the stroke just a little bit bigger so that it's a little bit easier for you to see. So for example, if I draw a shape with no fill, right, and there's a 5-point stroke, it looks like this. If I change it to say, I can change the fill right now since it's still selected, and just pick a color, and you'll see it automatically will go to whatever color I've chosen here, right? Which is pretty cool. I can also change the stroke size here. I can go up, and notice as I go up, the stroke gets thicker. I'm just holding it down with the mouse. That's a really thick stroke. Sometimes you want that. Of course, I can also change the stroke color as well. So you can change all the appearances here just by going back and forth inside these properties of the shape that you're doing, which is pretty cool. So now that I've set the properties like this, every other shape I work with will be with those same properties. Of course, I can independently then go back in and change them as I like, right, to whatever I want. So it gives you a lot of leeway here. It's really quite fun to play with and get the idea of. So with these strokes, you sometimes will need to use the selection tool. For example, if you want to change the size, right, you can do that by just pulling. This is very much just the same as in Photoshop. You can also click on it, and you can pull here. It's just a lot of fun to experiment with and see what you can do. There's also a polygon tool, which creates multi-sided figures, right? And you can really experiment with that. It's a lot of fun to work with the polygon tool. You can change everything you want about it. And then you've also got the line segment tool, which allows you to create lines. And you can hold and drag to create the lines. And of course, you can also rotate them by pulling along the side here. You can rotate the lines. So the idea in this project is that you're going to be using these combined shapes to make something of a robot type figure, or it could be some other composition that you'd like to create that just challenges you to use these different shapes together, right? And if you look, for example, on their website, they walk you through how to make something kind of like this robot. Of course, you could make a robot, but feel free to use your imagination using all these different shapes and also the combining shapes tool to make some kind of interesting digital creation. That's what we're doing in this Adobe Illustrator project. So after you've finished creating your composition, your robot, or whatever you're going to make, you do need to save the project, but you also need to export it. So the way you do that is, of course, you go to File, Save As, and notice that when you save your project, it will give it a .ai extension. That's Adobe Illustrator, right? So I could call this robot thing, whatever I want to name it, and I could save it. Now, the only thing is it's an AI file, right? So when you turn your project in, just click OK, Canvas is not necessarily going to like that particular file. You need to export it first. So after you save it, go to File, Export, and then do Export As. Then Ping is perfect, right? Save it as a PNG file, and then export it, and then you will now have two versions of your project. You'll have the Adobe Illustrator file and the Ping file. The Ping file is the one that you're going to turn in for your completed work. Just make sure you understand that part.